Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/JoshuaVelas and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link in the description down below, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augmented Experience podcast. My name is Joshua Velas. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down with fellow enthusiasts to talk about what's going on in the technology, business, and gaming world. I hope you guys enjoy. Alright everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Velas. I am your host as usual. And obviously today's a Wednesday's episode, so you guys already know what we're going to talk about, but it's going to be a little bit different this time around because I kind of alluded to when we did the talk with Juan a while back, and there was another guest that I was planning on getting on, and now we actually get to do the episode, so I'm going to let the guest introduce himself because I can't really do him justice that well, but I'll let him introduce himself.
What's up, everybody? I'm Get Flanked. I'm a content creator, Twitch partner, and content creator for Dark Zero Esports. And I'm happy to be on the show. Happy to talk about some stuff today. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, I really appreciate having you on today. So obviously today's episode is going to be over the state of Rainbow because this is something you guys have been asking for a while, and you guys have voted for this. So we're going to be talking about the state of Rainbow. So when we think of the state of Rainbow, there's a lot of things to break down. Obviously, as you know, Get Flanked is very familiar with the beginning of the game as well as I'm. Like, if you guys, all the people that know me in real life know that I played the game since it came out. So there's really a lot to break down, but I don't know. Where do you want to start, man, with this one? This is a beast to take on, man.
The state of Rainbow, it's a tough question to answer. I mean, I feel like in some ways, in a lot of ways, Rainbow Six Siege is in the best state it's ever been. However, if you look at some other things, there are some problems in the game that are really ruining the experience that we haven't really encountered before. I'm, thinking whenever I think about that, I think about console. I think that the state of the game on console is probably the worst that it's ever been. But that's not Ubisoft's fault. It really isn't. Ubisoft can't do anything about mouse and keyboards. Ubisoft, I don't know all the details around it, but my understanding is that Ubisoft can't do anything about DDoSers. And those are not specifically unique to console. I mean, there is DDoSing on PC, but not nearly as prevalent as it is on console. So those are two things that console players are dealing with right now that are really having a big effect that have gotten more popular over time. I'm not saying those problems never exist before, but certainly those problems have grown and how common they are to see within the game over time. With that said, we're now seeing operators introduced in a much better state. If we're looking at the game overall, you compare the release of Ella and Blackbeard to the release of Mozzie and Gridlock, which I think is really showing that how the developers are maturing and how they're approaching new operators in the game, and that's a really good thing to see. So, we're seeing things like rank changes that a lot of people are supporting. Pig and Ban being in ranked. Looks like next season we might even see some of the maps coming out. Those are huge quality of life changes. So I think there are some big problems within the game right now. But with that said, when you look at the things that are under the control of the Ubisoft developers, the things that are under their control, they're doing really well at, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think we can even break this down a little bit further because obviously there's a lot to dissect in just that little amount that you talked about. So let's break down the console part because I think this is kind of the one where I'm more familiar with, especially myself. Like, I've started on console and then I recently moved to PC. But when it comes to the console side, this is where we have to admit there's clearly a big difference between playing the PC version and the console version. We're not going to stand here and pretend that there isn't because there clearly is. Like, when you look at, I think in terms of optimization wise, like the PC version runs much smoother than the console version. And I think, where do you think Ubi really lands in terms of what can they really do? Obviously, we know that the next gen hardware is coming out soon. We know that the next Xbox is launching next year, and obviously the next PlayStation presumably next year, maybe even 2021, depending on how they plan on doing that. But I don't know. Where do you think we really can start hitting this one, especially with the topic of the console side?
Well, I think that at the end of the day, you have to look at kind of, what I mentioned before, what's under Ubi's control and what's not. I mean, Ubi does not control whether or not PlayStation will allow them to run a test server they can throw hot patches to on a daily basis. If that's not a possibility because Sony doesn't have the infrastructure in place or has some type of policy in place that doesn't allow that to happen, then Ubi can't do anything about that. So that's one thing you hear a lot. Console players want a test server on console, and I agree. I would love for it to be there, but is that realistic? I don't know. I mean, I don't think anybody necessarily knows the answer to that fully, except for Ubisoft and Sony, as far as what all goes into that. So, that's really what I look at there. I can tell you firsthand, just from talking to developers over time at events and stuff like that, that there's a lot of developers that play on PS4, PS4 and or Xbox. Console is a huge deal to them. They know full well that the majority of the player base is on console, and that is not something that they take for granted. So yeah, I mean, it's frustrating, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know how intelligently I can speak on the topic of what they can actually do to make console better, because I think that there's a lot of unknowns for the average person out there.
Yeah, and especially when you look at a lot of the conversations going on with people breaking down the console side, like obviously PC players are going to be more aggressive when approaching the topic, especially on PC, because obviously, yes, they're kind of upset that, the console side is over there, and, it kind of, they think it messes with the development cycle. I don't think it really does, but like I said, like you mentioned, there is some unknown variables that as, players, we won't really know. Like we can't figure that out because there, like you mentioned, there are some things that Ubisoft has control over, and there's some things they don't. And I think maybe some of the player base is kind of being more, I'm not saying closed-minded about, but they're being a little bit stiff on the matter because I think it's just rational how human beings act is they want answers to everything. Like they always want like direct answers to everything, but obviously there's situations where there's gray areas where there isn't a straightforward answer to it. Like there's many variables that are, I'd say, interceding in that matter. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing, we're kind of making it sound like life is miserable on console. I've played more console this season than I have in the last few, and I've really enjoyed a lot of my time there. And I think there's been some improvements. If you look at the friendly fire, reverse friendly fire, that made a huge difference in console, especially in casual. It used to be in casual, I mean, you joined the game, it was like TKs. Pretty much every round there'd be TKs in casual whenever I played on PS4. Now with the reverse friendly fire, it's not nearly as common. There still are trolls, there still are people that are doing stuff, but that's been a huge quality of life improvement for the console player. And I think, I don't know, I think another, one other problem that, if we're going to mention a good, mention a bad, I think that smurfing is a big problem on console, just the nature of it. And I'm not sure, again, what Ubisoft could necessarily do there. But, it is what it is kind of at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of like you can't really do much in this scenario. Like there's not a straightforward way of handling it, because especially when we bring up Smurfs and everything like that, because some people will be like, oh, well, you have Smurfs on PC too. What about them? And I'm like, okay, that's where, it makes it even weirder, because then on PC it's a little bit harder, because it's not that I think personally the many games I've played on PCs, like personally, because I haven't played console since last year. Well, actually, I haven't played console since I built my PC, really. But I think in terms of smurfing, if we really want to go into that one, it's kind of a little bit harder, because on PC, I don't know, maybe it's just I haven't personally ran into that many Smurfs, but I know that you've already done similar discussions in this matter, like dealing with, Smurfs, cheaters, and stuff like that. Because obviously in terms of cheating, yes, the cheating side is more prevalent on the PC platform, clearly.
As far as hacks, like wall hacks, stuff like that, absolutely, yeah, there's no doubt about that. As far as Smurfs, I mean, the big difference obviously is that you have to pay for each account that you have.
Yeah.
So that right there creates a barrier to Smurfs that doesn't exist on console. You know, you can create several different accounts on one console with one owned game for free. And I want to be clear here too. Like, I don't have a problem with multiple accounts. I have multiple accounts. I have 3 accounts on PC. As long as you are honestly trying to win every single game that you play in ranked, you're eventually going to get leveled out. Yes, you may, you may have some games in your placement matches where you're playing against lesser competition than you should be, but that's the nature of the rank system. You know, as long as you're trying to win, eventually that elo is going to level out and put you where you belong. The problem is when people have enough accounts where they feel like they have an account that they can manipulate the matchmaking with. They can purposely lose matches and then use that account to boost their friends and manipulate the matchmaking that way. That's when it becomes a problem. And when you have access to as many accounts as you do for free on console, I feel like that has become a problem.
Yeah, and I think we can, being honest with ourselves, like, especially with the console specifically, when we focus on consoles, it's a different beast in its own right. Because obviously some people have just said, why does Siege worry so much about the console player base? They haven't really contributed that much. But I'm like, okay, let's not go that far, because if we start going into extremes, we're essentially lying to ourselves. Like, we're not going to stand here and pretend the console player base hasn't done anything. It's definitely helped Rainbow in a big sense, even though, yes, in terms of power wise and in terms of, smurfing being more prevalent on console than PC, I'd say there's give and takes. Like, there has to be a balance. I'd say it's a balance, but even then, some people will be like, well, we kind of don't want to deal with all these Smurf issues on console. But then obviously on PC, you also have hackers and everything. And then, we have all these. I'd say there's an easy way to balance it out, because, there's always a negative to each side, whichever platform you play on, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of perks, like every time I play console, I'm reminded of how nice it is sometimes just to chill with a controller and not have to have like the perfect posture at your desk, and and all that, like not have to alt tab out all the time, just the simplicity of playing on console. There's a lot of perks to playing on console. And I can tell you straight up, like if it wasn't for console, I mean, when you're talking about console and Siege, that's the two are joined at the hip. I mean, if you look even at Pro League, the majority of North American Pro League players, I would say it's at least close to the majority of Pro League players started on console.
Yeah,
I think that's probably a fact at this point.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, yeah, I mean, console has been an integral part of Siege, and it still is. I'm really excited for the next generation, and that's honestly what I'm more focused on right now. It's coming. The next generation of consoles is coming. It's going to be important to see what Sony does, what Microsoft do to try to fix some of the ongoing problems that have frustrated player bases on their current gen of consoles. See if they can make some changes to fix those problems, particularly mouse and keyboard. If they do, and Ubisoft does their part to make the transition good, this could be amazing to see the next generation of console players on Rainbow Six Siege. It's going to be really cool. Yeah, and think about that. Ubisoft could so easily say right now, okay, we're going to make Rainbow Six Siege 2. Like, that would be the money grab.
Yeah, that would be the easy money grab.
Yeah, but they're not. They're sticking with this game. They don't want to divide the player base. And, I mean, you have to that's admirable, without a doubt. Yeah, let's just hope that, Sony kind of meets them halfway to fix some of the problems that are frustrating players.
Yeah, especially when we, look in terms of power-wise. Obviously, yes, we can look at the rumors and the leaks of the next Xbox and next PlayStation. We can easily do that and just be like, oh, there's definitely a big jump in power specifically in the CPU areas where the consoles were lacking the most. The Jaguar CPUs were just not that good. They weren't. And I know a lot of people are a lot more interested in the fact that, there's going to be Zen 2 architecture inside of them now. Obviously, they're not going to be like the PC version. We're not going to stand here and say they will be, because they're not crazy enough to do that, but it will definitely be a power jump. And I think that power jump overall, especially with how I remember you did a video a while back talking about the state of the console Siege specifically, because how are they going to handle porting that over to the next Xbox and next PlayStation, especially with a big jump in power, especially it kind of creates a little bit of a issue. I'd say it creates a little bit of an issue, especially when we're talking about big increases in power. That how does an Xbox One player play with somebody that's on the next Xbox? Because obviously there's going to be, far superior frames on the next Xbox, and then the same thing can go for the next PlayStation. But how do you think that's going to overall work in your opinion?
It's going to be an adjustment for console players, but I mean, PC players have dealt with this for years. Everybody that's playing on PC is playing on different a different system right now. Some people might have 60 frames, some people might have 240. And I mean, obviously, going from 60 frames to 140 frames, there's a big difference. There is. It's not the difference between gold and diamond. It's not. It's just simply not. It's a noticeable difference. I'll even go as far as to say, yeah, it's an advantage, but it's not night and day. Okay. And, the thing about it is, I don't know. I think it's just going to have to be something that console players get used to and realize that it's not the end of the world. It's different than anything they've ever had to experience, but it's not something that gamers in general have never experienced, and particularly PC players.
Yeah, especially I'll bring a personal example in mind. Obviously, I'm playing. Everybody that knows me in real life knows what my rig is. Obviously, I'd say it's not the most high end, but it's still, I'm not bottom of the barrel at least. But in comparison to me and my friend Rodrigo's playing on a maxed out the FTW 2880 Ti, i9 900K. He's playing on top of the line everything. Spent $3,000 on it. And Rodrigo, in terms of gameplay wise, like you mentioned, even though he's using a 240 hertz monitor and I'm only using 144 hertz, that doesn't really make or break the difference, I'd say, in terms, because map advantage, or I'd say map knowledge, is very important in Rainbow. Being good at communication is very important in Rainbow as well. So in terms of hardware, I think, giving my 2 cents on it, I don't think it really will make a difference. I think it just comes down to the skill of the players. What overall is players will adapt with the new hardware. They'll just, I have a little bit extra power under the hood, so that means I can, pay a little bit more attention to some aspects. Or I'd say that's how I kind of view it in my opinion. But I don't know.
No, I completely agree. I would even go as far as to say that adjusting your field of view is a bigger advantage than frames.
Sure.
If
it is,
if a PlayStation 5 player can adjust their field of view and a PlayStation 4 player can't, that's probably a bigger advantage, in all honesty. But again, that's something that PC players have dealt with as well. I mean, adjusting your field of view higher, it affects your frames. So if you're playing on a lower end rig, then you might not be able to get the frames that you want if you adjust your field of view up to 85 or 90 or whatever. So again, it's there, and it's going to frustrate some players, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and I think that's what most people have to realize, especially when the console side is a little bit more. That's something like we mentioned, there is a lot of variables that go into it, so we can't really have that straightforward of an answer. In my opinion, I don't really think there is that way, but there are some aspects we can say, well, based on how this has worked out before, we can make an assumption that this is how it will go. But I think in terms of, if we want to transition a little bit to the PC side, this is where it becomes a little bit more interesting, because obviously, yes, how the game is currently, the game is currently in a great position so far. Obviously, there's still some imbalance. Clearly, we're not going to stand here and pretend there isn't any imbalances in the game, or there hasn't been any major annoying bugs. Obviously, the main one that a lot of people didn't want me to talk about, but I'm just going to do it because I think it's necessary, especially when we're talking about an episode over the state of Rainbow, is probably the whole shift, running, spamming shift. I know that's also a big, I'd say not as big, but more like a little glitch going on that a lot of people haven't really caught on to it. And they're when they find out what it does, essentially, they're like, wow, this is the second coming of Christ, because you basically can run with your foot set silent, which I was like, there's no way this is true. But I tried it and I'm like, holy crap, it's actually real. But I don't know. Where do you think we should start with the conversation with PC? Where do you think is a good area to, tackle the PC side?
Well, I think that first of all, what you mentioned as far as the shift run, that's already been patched, I'm pretty sure. I want to say one of my teammates was testing that the other day, and they were doing it, and I was able to hear him clearly. But anyway, yeah, that I mean, I think that. So okay, state of the game as far as PC. I mean, I think that it's the best it's ever been.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, even if you look at the PC player numbers, I mean, Operation Phantom Sight, for as much as people have talked about how the new operators were underwhelming, the player counts as far as Steam charts have gone, which, you know, is a good indicator as far as PC players, are the highest they've ever been. And it's pretty amazing, you know, when you think about this game and how it keeps actually growing, especially on PC. So I think that I would attribute that to a lot of things. I mean, with Operation Phantom Sight, there was a big marketing campaign. I think that was, you know, a big part of it. Yeah. There was a sale associated with it. Obviously, that's a big part of it. I think the pick and ban and ranked has been a really, really big improvement.
Yeah, it's definitely helped a lot.
Yeah. I mean, just being able to, okay, if your team does not want to play against Monty, you don't have to.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, if you're the type of person who might grind the game for 3 or 4 hours per day, which there are a lot of people out there. I know that's not necessarily the average gamer, but there's a lot of people out there that want to do that during the summer.
Yeah, there's people.
You know, then yeah, I mean, not having to play against operators that just infuriate you are going to only increase that time that you and that enjoyment that you get out of the game. So yeah, I think that pick and ban has been a huge plus to the game, and has probably added to that player count. And it's not even necessarily that you're getting new players with pick and ban, but maybe that the players are playing more because of that and other changes that have been introduced into the game. I think that we're getting to the point with PC now where players, like, it's crazy competitive. It really is. I mean,
yeah.
it's so crazy how much better like gold players are now than they were even 6 months ago. Really, I mean, a year ago, it's like night and day.
There's a big difference.
There really is, and I attribute that to, I mean, obviously a lot of things, but it's just map. You know, the biggest thing in Siege is map knowledge. So players are learning the maps. Players are learning, you know, how to manipulate the map better and stuff. And it's, yeah. So yeah, I think that next season is going to be a big deal because I think that they're going to be changing some ranked maps just based upon some of the things they've said. I think that if they remove some of the maps from ranked, I think that's going to be, I mean, we're going to be in such good shape in this game.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be so huge.
That's what I said. Like, for me, especially like someone that just barely started playing PC only about, well, yeah, I had a PC for over a year. It's just I didn't build an actual rig itself until like last month, really. But I remember starting on PC and I wasn't comfortable with keyboard and mouse. And this is kind of how I feel like the game was in a good spot balance wise, because like we mentioned before, like map knowledge is very important in Rainbow. I'd say besides obviously, you know, hitting your shots, you know, map knowledge is very important, because if you know and you can hear where the enemy's coming from, then, and you know what that area is, then you can obviously get the advantage very easily. And for me, I remember starting off on PC with using my controller because I was like, okay, I'm not comfortable with keyboard and mouse. I don't like using the keyboard on my laptop to do this. And so I just use my controller. And then my friends were like, bro, how in the heck are you hitting these headshots and you're using a controller? And I'm like, well, keep in mind, I have been playing console since it came out, and I'm very familiar with all the maps. So it definitely helped out a lot. And I think when we think of balance-wise, yeah, I think the game right now, like, I've seen you do multiple videos on it, and you've already shared your opinions on it, that the game is in a healthy spot right now. Even though, yes, there are some areas where some people will say, they would say, I'd like to argue that obviously like Jackal and, you know, Blitz and, you know, obviously people are like Nook should be buffed a little bit and stuff like that. I think overall, besides those things, I think the game is in a healthy spot. Obviously there are some annoyances. Clearly, we're not going to pretend there isn't, but in terms of especially ranked, and I think what you mentioned before when you said it, that the skill gap seems like it went up like from 1 year ago to now. Or when I run into casual games, it feels like I'm playing ranked because of how much everybody's sweating their butts off. And I'm like, everybody's joking around, but you see all these people that are like gold ones playing casual, and I'm like, what in God's green earth is going on? And they're like over here calling everybody trash, and I'm like, bro, why are you playing casual right now? Like, I get it's a warm up, but why don't you just do a T hunt? Like, just practice your aim on T hunt. Don't come on casual and ruin it for everybody. But I don't know. What do you think? Where do you think that lies specifically, like, or specifically that little part with terms of operator balance a little bit?
I mean, if I'm looking at the problems on that Siege has right now and what needs fixed for next season, particularly on PC, operator balance isn't at the top of the list. There are, I mean, yeah, there's Nook needs a buff probably. Warden needs a buff almost definitely.
Yeah, that's a good. That should happen.
You know, Jackal, his ban rate needs to come down. And you know, there needs to be things looked at there. But I mean, I put up a video the other day talking about a roam, and at the end of it, I played an Ela clip from back in the day, Ela, when she had 4 Grismonts, a 50-round mag, 0 recoil, her gun did more damage, and she had impacts. And people were in that, were watching that clip, and I had so many comments like, "Oh my god, this gave me like PTSD flashbacks from Ela." I mean, Jesus so Christ. I guess it's relative. Like if, I mean, maybe because I can look back at the terror of Ela, I don't look at the current situation as far as balance as being that bad. And maybe somebody who doesn't have that experience to draw back on, they might, you know, think that it is really bad. But yeah, I think as far as operator balance right now, we're the best we've ever been. If I'm looking at the problems for PC for next season, what I want to see improvement on is number one, it would be hackers. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Phantom Sight was an awful season for hackers. We had that teleporting hack, and it was really nasty in the beginning. So I want to see this season roll out with that not being so rampant. I mean, there's always going to be hackers. It's a cat and mouse game, but I want to see some improvement this season, please. Beyond that, I mean, I think that toxicity has to be near the top of your list as far as you know, any video game, any multiplayer video game, you have to put toxicity at the top of the list. It's just the nature of online that we have to try to improve upon. And then beyond that, I mean, one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion, is we need some type of streamer mode. I mean, streamers are the ones that really sell this game to a lot of people. And when somebody's like Dr. Disrespect or Shroud or somebody is streaming this game and they're being blatantly stream sniped, it's not good for the game, and it's something that we should try to address.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you brought up the streamer mode too, and another point that I'll go back to it. But it's interesting how we still haven't gotten the streamer mode, especially after you see all these more modern games came out and they all have it naturally in there. And I think that's, I don't know, maybe some people will say, well, the game is pretty old, but at the same time, that I wouldn't use that as an excuse to exclude something that, you know, is very useful, like you mentioned, because streamers are the ones selling this game, or the content creators. Like, they're presenting the game to the audience. That's what they're doing. Like, people are coming and watching their content, but at the same time, you know, new people see these videos and are like, oh, this actually looks pretty cool. I want to try this out and see what this guy's talking about. And you essentially get more people, and the player base keeps growing, because obviously we all remember when Rainbow Six came out, when people did reviews on it and stuff like that, it was not the most positively reviewed game. Everybody always goes to the Angry Joe review and then says, yeah, Rainbow Six is pretty much garbage. But now they look at it and they're like, oh, now it's one of the most popular FPSs you can probably play on console and on PC. And Ubisoft has done a great job, in my opinion, in how they've brought this game back and essentially pulled a huge 180 and brought it to the position where it is now, where it's arguably considered the most consistent and at least most talked about FPS right now, in my opinion, based on what I've seen in my circle of friends and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think, I mean, obviously, you know, Counter-Strike's up there, you know, as far as FPSs on PCs. I mean, there's a huge player base there. It dwarfs the numbers, player count numbers. At least on PC. You know, if you combine console and everything, you know, Siege might be up there, but we don't really know for sure. So, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, the whole thing, I think that the reason we haven't seen a streamer mode probably right now is, and I'm speculating here purely, but if I was the king of Rainbow Six Siege and I was looking at, you know, what should I have my team work on as far as the developers to make improvements, you know, I would start as, you know, as far as the number one priority would be, what can I do that would improve the game for the largest group of players? Yeah. And, you know, you look at something like the Friendly Fire, that was definitely something that's going to improve this game for every single player involved with it. So that's a very clear top priority. When you look at a streamer mode, yes, streamers sell games. Yes, streamers are an important aspect of any game in today's world. But how many people are you actually going to improve the game for by enabling a streamer mode? That's probably why we haven't seen it yet. And I would be surprised if we didn't see something to try to combat something like this within the next year. But I understand it not being a top priority for the development team.
Yeah, especially when, like you mentioned, like toxicity is another really big one, especially cheating. When we think of that, obviously toxicity, some people be like, they always bring up the Xbox party chats back in the day. They're always like, that's what turned boys into men. Like, everybody always brings up those jokes. But obviously on PC, you're going to run into some pretty toxic people. Like, there are some, like, obviously when people do the chat where you just press T and it goes to chat to everybody, like, you run into people putting some controversial things on there. We're not going to stand here and pretend people don't do that, because there's people that do, and they obviously, Ubisoft has done the best that they can to deal with some of those things, but obviously there's still, cracks that, people seem to get through either way. And so I think I do agree with you on that. In terms of toxicity and, cheating, those should be, I'm assuming that really is the top of the list, because it's what's overall ruining the longevity of a game. Because, if, say, you run into a lot of toxic people and you run into cheaters, and, the person that maybe just started playing the game, they probably don't want to play anymore, because they're like, well, I keep running into all these cheaters and, really toxic people, they just don't want to play anymore. So I don't know. What do you, in your opinion, where do you feel like, where can we really go with that? Because it is a very gray area to tackle.
There's so many different things. Number one, the report button needs to have some teeth to it. You know what I mean? Yeah. If you report somebody, you should feel like something might actually come from it. And right now, it just doesn't feel like that. So give us some options. Don't just give me a generic report button. Give me a report button for hacking. Give me a report button for racist chat. Give me a report button for somebody that's doing team damage or something like that. That needs to happen. I've talked before. I think that long term, we really need some type of a low priority queue matched with some type of behavior rating system. So at the end of a match, you can commend other players, very similar to what Dota has. Yeah. So that you can kind of put people together who have a high rating, and then you're reducing the risk of that group of players running into toxicity, and you're also rewarding people for behaving themselves in a game. I think that's probably the long-term solution, but from an X's and O's standpoint, I'm not sure how complicated that is. And it's been one of the staples of this game that they've said over and over again. They do not want to divide the player base, and creating separate queues for people based upon their reputation within a game would do that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to cause issues. Like, we're not going to stand here and pretend it won't, because the second you start separating queues for people based on, like, say, things that they do and everything like that, it does become an issue. And I think Ubisoft is at least doing the best that they can, but obviously, some of the player base, they are the vocal minority, but they're the ones that seem to be, they always keep complaining about everything. They're just like, well, Ubisoft's just being complacent. They don't want to do something, and then it just becomes a huge mess. But I do agree with you on that aspect that it's not as straightforward as we want it to be, because there's always consequences to what we do. Like, there's always a cause and effect to what we do. So that's how I kind of view it, and I agree with you on that view. I don't know. I'm trying to think where else can we really, because like we've already broken down. We've broken down the operator section. We've broken down like terms of priority, and we've also broken down like so far the state of PC is the healthiest it's been in a while. Obviously, there's some areas to improve on, but I think overall we have broken down mostly everything. Is there anything you think we might have missed?
Last thing I would mention is probably the state of Pro League and the competitive aspect for the game, which I think is a very big deal for the long term health of the game. I think that we still have a lot of work to do to get the average Rainbow Six Siege player interested in Pro League. I think that there's a lot of work that we as content creators need to do, as well as Ubisoft. I think that it's kind of a shared responsibility there. And there's any content creator out there that doesn't think that there's something in it for them in order to get their viewer interested in Pro League is insane. Like, if you can convert your viewer as a YouTuber, as a Twitch streamer, if you can convert your viewer into being a fan of Pro League, the odds of that viewer continuing to watch your videos, not for the next month, but for the next year, 2 years, goes up exponentially. And that is good for everybody involved. So I really think there's some work that needs to be done there. I don't think that the player count of Siege, I don't think that the viewer number of Rainbow Pro League matches the player count of Siege. I don't think that it's proportional, I should say. And I think that needs some improvement.
Yeah, and I do agree with you on that. Like prime examples like you and me talking right now. Like I didn't think about the Pro League at all, and maybe that's just because, like we mentioned, is Ubisoft really hasn't, and I'd say content creators haven't really done that good of a job. Well, I'm not gonna say they haven't done that good of a job, but they may not be viewing it as a benefit to them. Even though, yes, the Pro League overall is probably, I'd say, the most important aspect for any game, like any Pro League, for any game that has it, because obviously it's what breaks down balancing patches. It's what shows, okay, this is what is being exploited at the professional level, so we do need to deal with this. And it does help overall the growth of the game. And obviously, yes, Rainbow, I saw a little bit of the Pro League this year, and it was really fun. In my opinion, it was fun. And to me, it was I'd say it does help overall, but I think content creators just haven't done that good of a job presenting it as, you guys should probably consider watching this. It does help the overall state of the game, obviously supporting the players that you actually like and things like that. But that's kind of how I view it. But I do agree with you on that aspect, where it's like, people shouldn't view it as there is no benefit to me, when clearly there is.
Dude, I pick up every time I watch Pro League, I pick up something. So for the average viewer out there, if you're wanting to rank up, like, watch the best players in the world. You're gonna see the most amazing lines of sight. You're gonna see the most amazing vault cams you've ever seen in your entire life. And yeah, I mean, it's I don't mean to make it sound like it's not healthy. I think that if you look at all the matrices of Rainbow Six Siege, it's actually one of the most promising and healthy esports and that exists. But I just think it could be more so. It's frustrating because you can't force it. There are some esports out there that have tried to force themselves upon the player and force themselves into relevancy, and you can't do it. It has to happen naturally. But at the same time, I think that there's more that we could do as creators, and I think that Ubisoft could do as far as, promoting the matches, as far as making maybe the main subreddit a little bit more esports focused, and stuff like that.
And that's why I say, like, there is many things Ubisoft can do on their end, but at the same time, it's also a little bit of the community you can't really force it on the community. Like, you do that. Like, obviously that's how Rainbow grew to the point that it is right now, is it came organically. Ubisoft fixed a lot of the things. They listened to the community. Obviously, yes, and the result of fixing some things, they did cause some bugs, but they went back and they're still refining it, and they're still, I'd say they brought the PC side back to the point where it is now. Obviously, yes, some people will be like, console's still getting frustrated, but console is not really a issue with Ubisoft not doing their part. I think it really comes down to more of the hardware limitation that's on console side, is how I view it.
Here's what it is on console. Consoles right now are not set up to provide a fair and balanced atmosphere for competitive online games. They're not. And that's just the facts of it. As long as you can plug in a USB device that masks your input device, you will never get a balanced atmosphere on console. So if you're serious about Rainbow Six Siege and you want to compete on a balanced playing field, PC is really the only way to do that in every single match. Now, you will have the hackers and stuff like that. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
But you're not going to have the person who's playing with a completely different input device that you are, that's going to get, a significant advantage because of it.
Yeah.
So that's just the nature of console right now, and they have to solve that for the next generation, or it's just going to continue being the case. It's just going to continue being casual players play on console and the serious players play on PC.
Yeah, I think that's, some people say that kind of sounds messed up, but that's just the reality of it. Is even casual on PC, like casual on PC is not
the problem. The problem is that a lot of people view that as me talking down to console players. It's not the console player's problem, and it sucks because some people don't have an option. If you're 12 years old out there and you want to play Rainbow Six Siege competitively and you want to play seriously and you can't afford, or your parents can't afford, to get you a PC, that's understandable. Yeah. But it's not. But that's not necessarily all Ubisoft's fault either. You know what I mean? Like, there's some things that need changed on the console front in order for that to happen. And unfortunately, it looks like we're going to have to wait until next generation to have a hope.
Yeah, and that's just the reality of it. Whether some people are like, oh, we would need somebody to blame, but at the same time, with the console side, there's not really a direct person to blame. It's more of there's multiple...
Not for everything.
Yeah, not for everything.
I mean, Ubisoft has some things that they probably could have done better and can still do better, but there's some stuff that's out of their control as well.
Yeah, and I think that's just been the overall theme with our conversation is really there's some things Ubisoft can and can't control. That's just the reality of it. We can't expect them to have control over everything, even though, yes, it's their game, but there's some things inside of it they just can't control themselves. And like you mentioned, really, we have to just wait and see how next-gen consoles change things up, really. That's all we can hope and wait for. And I think that's pretty much all we can do, essentially, because until they decide what they want to do with keyboard and mouse on console, figure out how that's going to play out, and, we can't really speculate until, basically 2020, essentially, or 2021. So we just have to wait and see.
Yep.
But I think that's overall I think we covered pretty much everything. We went over Pro League, PC, console. We went over all the whole shebang. But is there any closing thoughts you have?
No, just appreciate you having me on. It's been an interesting conversation, and that's really about it. I mean, obviously, when you talk about subjects like this, you naturally gravitate towards the negative aspects, and it's easy to focus on that stuff. But I think overall, the state of Rainbow Six Siege is very, very good, and I think that there's a lot of games that envy what Siege has been able to do and achieve over the last 3 years, and I think it's just going to keep getting better.
Yeah, and I kind of appreciate that you said that too, because like you mentioned, there are some games that would be envious of where Rainbow is right now. Obviously, one of them that comes to mind is Fallout 76, or even things like Anthem is another one. People are they wish those games could get to the same point where Rainbow is now. Obviously, yes, all three of those games share a very rough start, but I think Ubisoft did the right thing and built up the game organically, built up the community organically, and then overall did the right thing. The game is in a healthy spot. The game's playable. It's very fun to play on PC. Console, while you do run into some issues, it's still enjoyable to some people, and it can still be fun. It's still an enjoyable experience. You even mentioned it yourself, you played more console this season than PC.
Well, I didn't mean it to come out like that. I've played more console this season than I have in the last several seasons. I still played more PC this season than console, but the amount of time that I spent in console this season was significantly more than I did in the previous 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, I think, that just clears things up a little bit. But I thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate this opportunity to interview and just get to have this conversation over a game we both enjoy. I think overall, thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you guys have yourselves a wonderful week so far. Obviously, you guys have already voted what Friday's episode is going to be, but I hope you guys come back and listen to Friday's episode. Also, if you're interested in, getting to more of who Get Flanked is, you can go to his YouTube page. I'll leave a link in the description, and, even listen to his podcast, because I know he has a podcast too, the Hot Breach podcast. So if you guys are interested in listening to podcasts, which if you are, you're obviously listening to mine, so you can give his a listen. But until then, guys, thank you guys so much for your time. I love you guys to death. Have yourselves a wonderful week, and I'll see you guys on Friday. Bye, guys.